Welcome to the
Unpopular Opinions.
Unpopular opinions.
Have unpopular opinions.
Unpopular opinions.
Okay, so what's an unpopular opinion?
Unpopular opinions.
To utter such blasphemy. He's got the nerve, the audacity, the unmitigated gall to echo such blasphemous nonsense. Just blasphemy.
How's everybody doing today? It's your boy Jalen, and I'm back with yet another unpopular podcast episode. If you listen to my last episode, I did a top 5 from the most underrated players in the NBA, and today I'm going to do my top 5 of the most overrated players in the NBA. So stay tuned. Everybody in the NBA is good. They're the best of the best. It's the best league. But some players are, of course, better than others, and some players are viewed as, I'm not going to say good, but some players are not as good as they're projected to me. And like I said, this is my unpopular podcast. So what I'm doing is there's 5 players that I need to discuss that to me are a little overrated. And I'm going to start off a little light. So, and of course, these aren't no order. These are just 5 players I'm talking about. Let's first talk about Mr. Marcus Smart. Do not get me wrong. Marcus Smart is a great player. Marcus Smart is a very rugged player. Marcus Smart does the little things. Marcus Smart is like a glue guy, you know. No, he's not going to give you 30 points a game. I don't even think he's ever going to score 30 in the NBA. He's not going to give you the most assists. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that. But Marcus Smart is a solid player. But you have to look at, and when I compare Marcus Smart, let me also compare him or put him side to side with Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas was on the Kings and the Suns before ultimately landing with Brad Stevens and the Celtics. Before, of course, he was with Brad Stevens and the Celtics, he was just a journeyman. He was a pretty solid. He was, of course, short, and he still is short, but he was a very solid journeyman. He was just a short player that could score a couple times. I remember one game he played for Sacramento when he literally killed Golden State. But, you know, those games are pretty much far and few between. Not saying he couldn't score, but he wasn't he wasn't a top tier scorer. Then you go to Brad Stevens, and he just exploded exponentially. He went from a journeyman to a MVP candidate. He had a couple 50-point. I know he killed the Wizards in a 50-point game. After his unfortunate passing of his sister, the game back he played in the playoffs, he scored 50 plus. He had a 50 plus game against the Heat, I believe. He just exploded. He went off, and while Isaiah Thomas is a great player, and before the injury he was a top tier player, I believe a lot of that had to do with Brad Stevens in the system that Boston has. Brad Stevens is one of the best coaches in the league. Top 3 to me, coaches in the league. And if you look at everybody that plays under his system, they flourish. You look at Jaylen Brown, who was coming out of college from Cal, and they were saying that all he is an athletic dunker. He can't shoot, he can't defend, he can't do. All he is a dunker. But now he is one of the best, or one of the top, shooters in the league. He's one of the top. He's one of the top players, along with Jason Tatum. Along with, now Kyrie's always been pretty good, but along with Kyrie, and I think that they benefit mostly because of Brad Stevens more than their individual play. Now, no, I'm not saying, with them working out and everything, that they don't improve themselves and they're not good players and it's all because of Brad Stevens. But Brad Stevens is in his system is a big part of why they're successful, which leads me to Marcus Smart. I look at Marcus Smart and I think Marcus Smart is in the perfect situation for him. He's on a team where he's not asked to score a lot. He's not the quote unquote leader of the team. He's arguably not even, well, no, he is their best defender, but he's definitely not their best player, like I said. And I feel if he went anywhere else, he would just be a guy. To give you an example of Brad Stevens, is look at Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley was great under Brad Stevens and alongside Isaiah Thomas. Avery Bradley, was one of the top defenders in the league at the guard position. He wasn't the best offensive guard, but he'll give you, a solid 12, 13, 14 points. He was great. He was a really good player. Then what happened when he left, Boston and went to Detroit? That didn't work out. He was forgotten. And then when he went from Detroit to the Clippers, still forgotten. Look at Isaiah Thomas. Now, yes, injury had a lot to do with this, but you go from Boston, where you are, I believe he was like 4th or 5th in MVP voting, to go to Cleveland and getting bounced before the trade deadline, then going to LA and staying for the rest of the year, but having to come off the bench. And now he's on his Sacramento, Phoenix, Boston, Cleveland, LA, and he's on his 6th team in Denver right now. I feel Marcus Smart is a great player, but Marcus Smart is, I don't think he's a great player. Marcus Smart is a good player, but his skills really are accentuated because he plays under Brad Stevens' system. And I feel if he didn't play under Brad Stevens' system, he wouldn't be that good. He can't shoot. He's one of those players that he cannot shoot, but he keeps shooting for some reason. Like, he does not stop shooting, but he can't shoot. He's undersized to be a shooting guard. He's never gonna lead you in scoring. While he can guard the opponent's best guard, he's not stopping the opponent's best guard. And he's known really for flopping more than anything. So it was funny to me while during this summer and free agency, he was mad because he wasn't really getting any offers. And I'm like, yeah, he's not as good as he thinks. He averages a career 9.2 points a game. He averages 4 assists a game, 4 rebounds a game, 2 steals, and 2 turnovers. And he shoots 29% from the 3-point line. That is horrible. No, it's a 3-point line. Those stats does not indicate a top tier player. But like I said in the last pod, you look at his stats, and stats don't really jump off the paper like he does in the like he does when you actually watch him. But like I said, I don't think he would be anywhere close to as good as he is if he didn't play under Brad Stevens, who elevates everybody that comes on board. Look at Semi Ojeleye. You couldn't tell me where that man came from before the NBA, but because he plays under Brad Stevens, now he's a quality player. Another person, Shane Larkin. Shane Larkin was slick, a quick journeyman. But because he went to Brad Stevens, now he's a quality backup. And I think Marcus Smart is a prime example of somebody that benefits under the Brad Stevens umbrella. And as soon as he leaves, if he leaves that, we'll really see that Marcus Smart is a very marginal player at best. And speaking of marginal player, I guess I'm gonna go a little controversial with this one. But let me talk about Clint Capella and why. Again, this is in no order, but he is, I guess, number 4 in the most overrated player in the NBA. You remember back in the day with Dwight Howard, where when he was dominant, he'll be able to, he catches lobs, he goes off pick and roll hard, but you were able to give him the ball on the block. Not saying he had the greatest post moves, not saying he even had a strong post move, but he at least had something. Then you go to DeAndre Jordan, who is arguably the most athletic center we've ever seen in the league. But he couldn't do anything but catch lobs, set screens, and block shots. Clint Capella is a poor man's DeAndre Jordan. Clint Capella is not shooting a shot. He's not. He can't shoot. He cannot shoot at all. Clint Capella is not leading you. He's not leading you in points. And just like I said with Marcus Smart, Clint Capella is. I'm so happy he did not go to Phoenix, because he would have been exposed in Phoenix. Clint Capella benefits so much playing alongside James Harden and now Chris Paul that it's not even funny. And playing under Mike D'Antoni's system. Mike D'Antoni's system is, of course, run and gun, 7 seconds or less. Mike D'Antoni is all about getting up and down, up and down, up and down, which benefits Clint Capella because all he has to do is catch lobs and set screens and block shots like a DeAndre Jordan. But he benefits, like I said, he benefits so much playing alongside James Harden and Chris Paul that I think it's clouding people's minds and clouding people's vision of Clint Capella is if you consider blocking, a two-dimensional player. He can't lock up no guards. He can't lock up any forwards. He's quick on his feet, but he has no post moves. In fact, what people do not realize, and think about this. Now, Daryl Morey, the GM of the Rockets, is always saying that they're trying to match Golden State. They're trying to beat Golden State. He's obsessed with beating Golden State, which is rightfully so. Golden State is the best team in the league. They have, arguably one of the best teams of all time. It's Golden State. Look at the end of almost every game. Now, last year's playoffs, Golden State was down 3-2 to Houston. Before Chris Paul, of course, injured his hamstring, Houston was looking primed to, beating or knocking off Golden State. But what I want you to do, if you have time, is to go back and look at every single game. Every single game. Don't look at the whole game, but look at every single game of that series. Look at the end of games. The last 5 minutes of each game. And ask yourself, and I want you to look hard and look for where Clint Capella is. You know what? You don't even have to do that. I'm going to tell you where Clint Capella is. He's on the bench. Clint Capella wanted to be paid a max contract. And speaking of max contract, let me keep going. Clint Capella wanted to get paid. Wanted a max contract. How would you give a player who cannot finish a game a max contract? Who is a liability at the end of games? Because like in today's NBA, it's more of a small ball game, and you can't now. Of course, you can abuse a team, on the offensive and defensive rebounds, but you can't guard anybody because he's not guarding Kevin Durant. He's not guarding Draymond Green. He's not guarding Andre Iguodala. He's sure as hell not guarding Klay Thompson or Stephen Curry. So you need to take them off the floor. And then if you look at another and a newly formed, I guess, small ball, he's not guarding Lonzo Ball. For the Lakers, of course, he's not guarding Lonzo Ball. He's not guarding LeBron James. He's not guarding Brandon Ingram. He's not guarding Josh Hart or Kyle Kuzma. And I don't know who you're gonna put at the 5. LeBron at the 5. So he's not guarding small ball lineups, which is what the NBA is turning into. So if you can't do that, how are you expecting to pay a guy a max contract and he can't even do that? He can't even finish a game for you. And that's why I think he is one of the most overrated players in the league, because, and I'm not saying he's not good, and I'm not saying he's not an important part or important piece to Houston, because he is. If Houston would have lost him, they definitely would have had no shot of even coming close to Golden State, because of what he does, on the offensive and defensive rebounds and catching lobs and setting. He's a great person at setting screens. But Clint Capella, like Marcus Smart, is benefiting, with the players and people around him. Clint Capella, if Clint Capella played for, I don't know, Milwaukee, he'd be terrible. If Clint Capella played for, what's another one? If the Bulls, oh my gosh, he'd be terrible. Clint Capella needs to play with a pass first, offensive minded point guard. He benefits for playing in Houston. He would do great on the Wizards with John Wall. He'd be really good with Boston. Even though I don't know how that would work with him and Al Horford. Yeah, it's kind of hard. He might be good with OKC, but Steven Adams is better than him, if you ask me. So Clint Capella is just thriving because he plays alongside an MVP, a future first ballot Hall of Famer, and whether you want to debate me or not, a future first ballot Hall of Fame coach in Mike D'Antoni. Because Mike D'Antoni did change the game with the 7 seconds or less offense when he coached Phoenix. So without them, Clint Capella is just a younger Tyson Chandler if he played for the wrong team. And that's why I think he's number 4 in the most overrated players in the league. And let me talk about number 3 and number 2, because they kind of coincide hand in hand. I mentioned Dwight Howard before. You realize and you saw when Dwight Howard lost when injuries really started hitting Dwight Howard and he started losing his athleticism, he wasn't able to change his his play style, which means he started to become a very marginable player. No, he's not terrible, and no, he isn't trash to me, because he's still, like I said, if you in whatever season he's in last year and still able to get 30 games, you're not terrible, you're not trash. But he's not what he was when he's not what he was when he was in Orlando. Blake Griffin, when we think of Blake Griffin, we think of highlight dunks when he dunked on Kendrick Perkins, when he dunked on Timofey Mozgov, jumping over Kias. We're just think of high flying dunks. And like Clint Capella, Blake Griffin really benefited playing alongside Chris Paul. Blake Griffin is a when healthy, he's one of the top 5. He's a top 5 power forward in the league. But I think that's only because if you really look at the league, there's not too many great power forwards if you think about it. You got, Anthony Davis. You got Draymond Green. You got Paul Millsap. And then you really have to think hard about, of course, Blake Griffin, but you really got to think hard, like, how many power forwards are in the league? Blake Griffin, his injuries, because he was one of those players that his career has been ravaged with injuries. Not saying that he had a career like Derrick Rose, where just injuries just destroyed his career. But Blake Griffin, once he started losing his athleticism, and once he started, once the game changed, and it started to like look him. I'm gonna say, once the game started changing, Blake Griffin's value went down, and you saw that when the Clippers gave him a max contract. That had his jersey in the rafters. We want you to be here forever. He was sold, and then he gets shipped to Detroit. Which leads me to number 2 in the most overrated players in the NBA. When you have a team with a front court of Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, you should be able to make noise in the league. In the East, that is arguably the best front court in the East, but it should be more than the East. That's arguably one of the best front courts in the league. Now, of course, you have New Orleans. You have Golden State, who hands down, when DeMarcus Cousins comes back, probably has one of the best front courts of all time with Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and DeMarcus Cousins. But so I know Detroit was already out of playoff range when Blake Griffin got there. But I remember they were like maybe 5 games out of playoff range, and you still there was a trade deadline, so you still had pretty much the whole second half of the season. How do you have Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin and still don't make the playoffs? Or I'm not even going to say make the playoffs, because like I said, they're about 5 games out, so you have some work to do. They didn't even sniff the playoffs. I think they finished like 11th or 12th in their conference, in the Eastern Conference. Blake Griffin can't shoot. He can't shoot out. Now he tries, but he can't. In fact, Blake Griffin shoots 32% from 3-point line, which is not good. And outside of the paint, like in the 2-point, the mid-range area, the man shoots 24%. That's not superstar numbers, man. And while he averages a career 22 points a game, again, most of that came from playing alongside Chris Paul. Blake Griffin's a good player. And when I say overrated, don't hear me say they're just straight trash. Cause they're not. But Blake Griffin should be a lot better than he is. But that's because, like Dwight Howard, I think his whole career, he has benefited off of his athleticism. And now that his athleticism is going away due to injury, he's not really able to adjust as much as other people have. Blake Griffin, yes, he can pass the ball a little bit. You know, he averages about 4 assists a game his career, but again, he took a dying franchise in Detroit and did nothing to help. Which, like I said, is why I also put Andre Drummond as one of the top most overrated players in the league. He averages 14 as a career, 14 points a game and 13 rebounds. However, outside the paint, like, you know, mid-range, he shoots a whopping 11%. And he doesn't make, and this is don't okay. Andre Drummond is a great player, but Andre Drummond is not a great player to me. Andre Drummond is not a great player in today's NBA. If Andre Drummond played back in the day with, you know, the Shaqs and the Alonzo, when the NBA was draft a great center or draft a center and put it down the block and let him work. That to me is when Andre Drummond would flourish. Andre Drummond really doesn't have any post moves. Andre Drummond is just strong and will catch lobs and block shots and get rebounds. That's not max contract player to me, especially in today's NBA. You see, when Detroit plays Andre Drummond on the court compared to when they play off, of course they play faster. But when they play with Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin, they are one of the slowest teams in the league, in a league that is a run and gun league right now. Yes, I think Blake Griffin and I think Andre Drummond are great players, but I don't think that you can win when those two are your best players. And I said this before, you know, outside the podcast, but I'll say it now. In today's NBA, I don't think your best player can be a center or a big man and still have championship aspirations. Look at New Orleans. They have arguably one of the best power forwards. Ain't no arguably. They have the best power forward in the league with Anthony Davis. One of the best quote-unquote big men in the league. They also have, and they've had Anthony Davis for a while, actually. And last year was the second time he's ever been to the playoffs. And last year was the first time he's ever won a playoff game. And that is because he had a healthy Drew Holiday with him and a healthy playoff Rajon Rondo, who were able to shut down and lock up Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. When your best option is a big man, I don't think your team has much to say. Hell, look at Grizzlies and Marc Gasol. He's their best player right now. Yes, they have Mike Conley, who landed on my most underrated player. But when you have Marc Gasol as your center focal point, they were garbage last year. So, and if the NBA was like it used to be, as in, you know, they really coveted the center, then yes, Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond would be great players and will be great additions to any team. But because of how the league has changed, to me, they're not as valuable as they would be, and they're definitely not max players. I wouldn't pay them the max. Now, maybe for Detroit, because Detroit is a tough destination to get players and to get free agents, then yeah, maybe I understand that. Maybe that's why they gave him the max. But if my sole goal is to win, then I cannot give Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond the max, and I can't have those two as my focal points of my team and expect to win. Think about it. Switch Draymond Green with Blake Griffin on Golden State. Yes, they would probably still win because you still have DeMarcus Cousins and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and what's his name? Klay Thompson. But they will not be as good as they would with Blake Griffin and switching out with Draymond Green. Switch Blake Griffin with the Pelicans, they would be garbage. Switch Blake Griffin with, I don't know. Hell, switch Blake Griffin with Marcus Morris on Boston. I don't think they'd be much better. The league has changed, and Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan should have changed. Are fossils to me. Fossils playing in the league. Just like Carmelo Anthony is sort of like a fossil playing, because he's more of a mid-range player, and the league is now, with analytics, his threes and layups and dunks. The only team that really still does mid-range is Golden State, and that's because they just have 3 of the top 5 greatest shooters ever. But Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are fossils, and that to me is not going to produce wins or championships, and that to me is not a franchise players, and that's why I think those two are some of the most overrated players in the league. And this brings me to number 1. I've been saying this for a while now about this player, but I don't see, no. When you have a player who's great in the regular season, like he is a really good player in the regular season. He averages, a lot of points in the regular season. He does all his damage in the regular season. But then there's such a drop off from regular season to playoffs. Like he's not good at all in the playoffs. In fact, I don't think he's ever had a good playoff series where he was like the deciding factor. And this person, in the number 1 and I know that I said there's no order, but this is to me the most overrated player in the NBA, and that is Kyle Lowry. I think people really underestimate how good DeMar DeRozan is, because of course, his Toronto's failures in the playoffs, and DeMar DeRozan really isn't a great 3-point shooter or a defender. But DeMar DeRozan is a bona fide scorer. So playing alongside DeMar DeRozan makes your job a lot easier. I'll tell you that. Kyle Lowry is, I don't see what everybody else sees. Kyle Lowry is a pretty good defender. He's a scrappy defender, but he's not that good of a shooter. While he shoots 37% career-wise from 3, he doesn't take that many threes. Well, he had an uptake the last few years, but he's not leading your team to the playoffs. In fact, he plays alongside Kawhi Leonard, but he's not, to me, he's not a top 5 point guard in the league. And and that's maybe because I don't know if there's really 10 great point guards, but he's top 10, but not top 5, not even close to the top 5, if you ask me. In fact, when I compare him to like a John Wall, Kyrie Irving, and him, as in Kyle Lowry, I don't think it's even close. I think he is a distant third. Kyle Lowry, I don't believe I'm almost sure he can't be a focal point and lead your team anywhere. In fact, if it wasn't for him playing alongside DeMar DeRozan, I don't think he could even lead a team to the playoffs. Kyle Lowry is not a scorer. While he's a good defender, he's getting older. And with him getting older, he's getting slower. And with him getting slower, it's easier for players to feast off him. And he does his body. I mean, he's lost weight the last few years, but he was always overweight, which is why a lot of people outside, in NBA circles called him Fat Lowry. And I don't know, man. You can just tell from my voice. I'm not gonna say I don't like Kyle Lowry because I don't have a problem with him, but I think he's very overrated. I don't think he is all-star. Well, maybe because he's all-star caliber in the East because there's not too many good point out of John Wall and Kyrie Irving. It's hard to think of great point guards in the East if you consider Ben Simmons and Giannis point guards, since that's what they pretty much play. But because they're not classified as that, I don't see too many great point guards in the East. So I guess that's where you have to put him. But Kyle, I just don't see it, man. I don't see this love for Kyle Lowry. Like if Kyle Lowry is on my 2K game when we're doing the random my player or my teams, and I pick him up, I gotta start over. Kyle, I just don't see where the love is, because Kyle Lowry, he's not the best shooter. He's an okay defender, but he's not the best defender. He's not like a Patrick Beverley or a Marcus Smart defensive type player. He's not that good. He only averages 6 assists a game. Playing with a team that had DeMar DeRozan, Serge Ibaka, players like that, I don't see it, man. I just don't see it. Kyle Lowry, and it even shows, like I said, in the playoffs, there's such a huge. I think he has the biggest drop from regular season Kyle to playoff Kyle is just complete, like night and day. Playoff Kyle looks like this trash, like garbage. I think he had one or two good games. One last year and 1 year before when he played Washington. I think there was one game where he came real clutch and hit like a couple threes down the stretch. But other than that, Kyle Lowry is terrible in the playoffs. He's a really good player in the regular season, but terrible in the playoffs. I.e., getting swept by LeBron and them every year they play. Swept, not just losing, swept. I think there was 1 year they won 2 games, but I think that's because, something with ratings and talk about that. But they lost 2 games. I mean, they won 2 games. Other than that, they got swept the last 2 years, or 2 or 3 years. I think 2. So I do not consider, just because outside of the top 5 or outside of the top 7, there's a smooth dip in point guard play, but it's especially with a healthy Mike Conley, it's very, very, very hard for me to put Kyle Lowry as a top point guard in the league, and that's just me. And there you have it, man. Like I said, Blake Griffin, Marcus Smart, Kyle Lowry, Clint Capella, and Andre Drummond, to me, that is my top 5 most overrated players in the league. Now, again, none of that's in order. However, Kyle Lowry is stamped my number 1, no order or not, my number 1 overrated player in the league. If you don't agree with me, of course, you can leave in the comments. I want to thank you for listening to yet another podcast. I hope that, I think we're going to start really diving into football heavy soon. So stay tuned for that, and much love.
Niggas on the block, right, wasn't in my right mind. Just a young brother hustling, trying to get mines. Moving with the 9-double-M. Homies like, you don't really wanna mess with him. Yeah, young teenager, infatuated with paper. Yeah, I had to get it cause mama, she wasn't able. Black and white TV set, no cable. 40s in the fridge, chicken noodles on the table. I wasn't born with a silver